Hello, welcome one and all for the Drinking Points live stream. I don't think that's the official name, but that's what I'm going to go with because we're here to talk about football and drink a few beers. So, everyone knows Scott, everyone knows Graham. They need no introduction. So I'm not going to waste any time there, but I will waste a little time, and I'm actually really excited to introduce our guest here. It's David Holden from PFF. He's the recently promoted static data manager. So I'm just going to tell you guys, this guy's sharp. He knows what he's doing. He knows fantasy inside and out. He knows NFL. He knows college. David, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. I'm excited to be here. Excited to talk some football.
Absolutely. So this is going to be a really laid back show. We're not gonna really get into anything that's gonna blow you away. This is more about just we need this. We do a lot of personal writing and stuff on our own, and we really need to have a live stream every now and then where we just kind of get to release and hang out with one another. But at the same time, we're going to talk about a lot of football stuff. We're going to talk about the draft. Obviously, we're probably going to stick to the running back, wide receiver class, the tight ends. There's a few that we're interested in, and I'm not going to speak for everybody here, obviously. And then there's a couple quarterbacks, but the running backs and the wide receivers, they seem pretty deep. So, Graham, what do you think about these running backs? Because I mean that it's pretty deep class. Maybe not at the top, but it's pretty thick in the middle.
Yeah, I've been saying it, all off season, man. I think this class, like RB3 through RB8, is like real tight and just kind of comes down to personal preference or whatever model that you use or however you view the class, man. But yeah, I think it's a lot deeper than 2021. Like I did not feel good about the depth at all last year. Obviously we like Najee, we like Javante, we like ETN, but after that, I struggled, man. Like you could put anybody at RB4, and I think you could make an argument for him. This year it's different. So, yeah, I'm in the thick of this class right now. And Wes, I want to get your thoughts later about Damien Pierce because I was just doing our rookie ranks that we have coming up on the site here soon, and you got Damien Pierce like super low, and I want to pick your brain on that because I kind of like him.
Yeah. So I'll just jump into that. I really don't. The way I ranked him, I don't think I have him as a super low guy. I just think that there's so many guys that I like that it's like you said, it's just kind of packed, and I had a hard time really moving him up further. I moved him way up from where I originally had him. I know Scott loves him, so at first I had him lower, and then the more I started researching the class, the higher I kept moving him up and up and up and up. And I'm still not. I'm only through about the top 10 as far as watching tape. But as far as data, I've looked at everybody, and he's definitely on my list. Somebody that I definitely want to watch. But I know Scott loves him, right?
Real quick, when you're looking at data, Wes, like what in particular are you looking at?
Well, I look at thresholds for the athleticism. And that's important, but it's not going to preclude a guy at running back. It's a position where we can see guys overcome. But looking for explosion, looking for he doesn't necessarily have to have a fast 40 time or anything. But if it's high, I'm definitely interested.
Right.
But I want to see the good footwork. In the either we don't get the shuttle or 3-cone anymore, but when we do, it's nice. That's why I love the pro days because they fill in the blanks for us. And then like I said, I want to see those explosive numbers, and I really obviously I look at the athleticism quite a bit. Obviously there are times where they can overcome that, but then when I'm digging into the numbers, I'm looking at for yardage after contact, and the ability. Like I know Scott's a big broken tackle guy, and so I want to see guys as well. I want to see guys that can break tackles, but then at the same time, I'm looking at guys that are that are the multi-dimensional guys that can catch passes and things like that. Just looking at overall, but I think you can look at data 100% of your time, and you're still not going to get the full picture on players. And I think that there's a point where you just have to break down and watch the tape, and you've got to be able to marry those two to determine if you can't determine if it's a system-based production or if this guy's a special player. I think that's really important. So I mean, that's where I'm at, and I really love this class. I am in love with this class, like a big old heart. Like, I love this running back class. I think this is a running back class that we are going to be talking about for the next decade. I think it's that good. Now, I'm not saying there's only a few at the top. Obviously Breece Hall, I mean, I've got him right at the top. Right there with the best in the NFL. I think he's going to be a really special player. And let's bring David in here, because I got to admit, I wasn't as excited about Breece Hall right away, but one of the people that I saw drafting Breece Hall and Devy real early on is David Holden. And when I started digging deeper, I was like, whoa, this guy, so what do you think, Dave? I know you traded him away in at least one of our Devies, but I know you were drafting him early. What do you think here on Breece?
Yeah, I mean, I was always a big Breece Hall fan. I mean, you look at his path that he had in college, and then you look at his testing, and it's eerily similar to something that Jonathan Taylor did.
Yeah, it is.
Like, eerily similar. He's a starter. He's a bell cow. Didn't miss any games. I mean, the dude he's a monster. I mean, I think he scored in like 20 plus something games. And I think, and he's a complete package as well. I think when you look, even like somebody like Jonathan Taylor had receiving questions, which you don't really have with Breece. I think the questions, in general, were some of the athleticism and some of the long speed that can get a little tough to see on tape. But he kind of answered that stuff at the combine with a 4.3 40. I know it was a little bit of a fast track, but even still, if you assume that's low 4.4s, I think that he kind of answered those questions. And just to speak in general on the running back class, I think it's not just like a deep class in terms of talent, but I think it's a really deep class in terms of guys who can see early playing time because of the skill sets. It's a lot of third down backs. There's a lot of guys who can make NFL rosters, being that third, fourth round, fifth round, and then being able to find playing time and maybe jump up in fantasy because these guys have the skill sets to pass, block, and catch. Like, you look at somebody like Brian Robinson, who I think as a player, he's fine. He's a good player, but coaches are going to love him because of what he brings and how tough he is, and because he can block and he can catch the ball a little bit and he can get you tough yards. And so I think you just find guys like that who can kind of give you a little bit of everything and are going to make their way onto the football field. And I think that's what's so exciting about this class in general, because normally, last year you have Jamison Williams, Travis Etienne. I think Michael, everyone was talking about Trey Sermon, and Trey Sermon barely made it on the football field. Michael Carter started kind of to get it going. But I think in general, you're going to see more of these guys playing earlier because they're a little bit more NFL ready. It's a little bit of an older class as well, which helps in general.
Well, you struck a nerve there with Trey Sermon. That hurt because, I will say his first carry, if you haven't seen it, I mean, this guy got knocked into 5 years ago on his first carry. The concussion that he suffered on that first carry was disgusting. So, but yeah, I mean, I agree, and I think that there's a lot of guys in this class with the skill set to at least find a role in the rotation in year one. So I'm really excited about this class.
But that's not really valuable to me. Where I stand on the running back position, especially in Dynasty. I want bell cows. I want high-end running backs. I don't want third down James White-esque running backs. I don't want change of pace running backs. And I'll take, an early down workhorse, sure, but certainly not value it as much as a bell count. I'm not sure I'm seeing too many players that fit that mold. I'm seeing Breece Hall, extremely high level prospect with excellent bell cow potential as soon as he steps on an NFL field. Kenneth Walker, I'm seeing an immediate workhorse, excellent early down runner, the best runner in the class. Questions as to his pass catching potential, but it surprised me. I'm actually pretty cautiously optimistic in that regard, and I know you are as well, Wes. And then it's murky, and then it's really murky. You could say there's zero rookies in this class ready to be starters in year 1, year 2, outside of dream landing spots without any competition, or a RB1 who goes down with an injury. You could say maybe there's 1 to 2 other guys. I'm not quite there just yet, but let's count them. Let's count them. How many immediate starters do you see? And keep in mind, this is a fantasy show more or less, so I'm not viewing a third down back who's going to get 20% of the carries as a starter. Or a workhorse who's totally a non-factor in the passing game. So what do you see there, Wes?
No, I agree with you. I think maybe I gave the wrong impression. What I really meant to say is we're going to see a lot of players in this class. Like if you look back to last year's class, there was only a handful of guys that even got to see the field for even, like you say, the 20-30% of the carries. There were only a couple of those guys. There weren't very many. But I think that this class, you have to start somewhere when you're not Breece Hall and when you're not Kenneth Walker. You have to start somewhere. And I think that is something that we're going to see right away from a lot of these guys. I feel like there's a good at least 10, I think, that are going to come out. And somebody you didn't mention is Isaiah Spiller. I think he didn't test to the level that I was looking for.
He's like my RB7, Wes.
Yeah, well,
Isaiah Spiller's got serious concerns, man.
No. I'm not saying he doesn't. But what I'm saying is I think he's got the potential there to be somebody that can step into a bell cow role. But he's probably going to need some things to fall in place for him. I'm not saying he's going to be drafted that way.
I'm right in line with Scott for what it's worth. Like I like Breece, I like Kenneth Walker. I think Brian Robinson has a 3-down skill set. Like I think he can be good enough.
Yeah, I like him more than most. I just found out today that Greg Cosell likes him more than most. So I feel really good about that. Ball is Life just commented, I've heard a bunch of Alexander Madison type fantasy assets at running back in this class. And that's really what I see. And if you guys know me and how I play fantasy, especially how I play Dynasty, is I'm not drafting Alexander Madison types. Tyler Algier as his high-end comp got Alexander Madison from Greg Cosell. Rashad White, his numbers were very similar in the Zach Hill system to Alexander Madison. So I think someone else got an Alexander Madison comparison. But just from a fantasy perspective, like what does Madison bring to the table? He'll give you 3 good games per season when Dalvin Cook goes down, but like holding RB2s on NFL teams, especially ones who get average like 4 touches per game when the starter's healthy, that brings really, really nothing to the table. But Wes, let's start with your RB3, whoever that is in this class, and what you see their immediate impact as and their long-term upside.
RB3 for me is without a doubt. Is definitely shoot Arizona State.
Rashad White.
Rashad White. I like Rashad White quite a bit. I think he's a guy that can come in. I think he can definitely can catch the ball. If he really wanted to, he could play in the slot. and I could say the same for my RB4, James Cook. I think he's another guy that I think can. Who said that?
These are the 2 best pass catching running backs in the class per Greg Cosell, and it seems like that's a key component to your evaluation here.
Honestly, I've never read a Greg Cosell player evaluation in my life. No knock on Greg Cosell, but I don't read other people's player evaluations.
Right. So for the folks at home, you definitely should be. reading those player profiles.
But how am I supposed to write a player profile if I'm reading other people's player profiles?
Which you can purchase at fantasypoints.com for the Fantasy Points Draft Guide. Super low price, well worth it. But yeah, that's what Wes brings to the table and why he's so special and unique is he doesn't go off of anyone else's work. Much to my chagrin, he doesn't look at my sports score. He doesn't read my model, the articles related to my model, things like that. But that's also like super valuable to us because when Wes is in lockstep on a player, like he is in this instance with myself and Greg Cassell, you know, that's an even more strongly positive indicator of a player's success at the NFL level. So, and we're sort of unique in this regard with Rashad White in particular, because he's going to be in my top 5. Seems like he's in Greg's top 5. He's your RB3, but you look around the industry, you look at Lance Zierlein, he has him RB15. You look at Dane Brugler, he has him RB17. I did some investigation to Dane Brugler's Twitter mentions over the past 4 months, and someone's called Dane lazy for having Rashad White as his RB17. And Dane Brugler responded to that with, well, then I guess NFL teams are even more lazy because most of the ones I've talked to have him even lower, something along those lines. And so maybe there's something here with the NFL teams that we're not seeing. Maybe it's off the field concerns. Maybe it's an injury history.
It's definitely not off the field. I met the kid. It's nothing to do with that.
I know. So I dug into both those. I also talked to Jim Nagy, director of the Senior Bowl, says it's none of that. I mean, the kid won running back of the week at the Senior Bowl. And
I think what you have is a lot of people are, and we see it every year in the draft. They're not going to tell you who's on their board. I'm sorry, Dane Brugler. I'm sorry, Lance Zierlein, but you don't have your finger on the pulse of actual NFL draft boards. You do not.
You have agents' ears. I mean,
you can pretend that you do, and you can tell people that you do. You know squat about what's on an NFL team's draft board.
So I mean, I'm kind of. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt. Let's say they're right. Let's say a lot of NFL teams are down on him. Let's talk about potential red flags, Wes. He's 23 years old. He's
stiff in the hips. He's stiff in the hips. Yeah,
a former JUCO transfer like Ramondre Stevenson, who panned out.
The only red running backs in the NFL, I mean the NCAA. Yeah, it's not a big deal.
So remember, I'm very data driven in my approach. Plugged him into the model. The model loved him. So I was looking for a red flag. The only one I could find is that Zach Hill's RB1 in 6 seasons as an offensive coordinator have always gone off. Always obscene levels of productivity and efficiency. You have Jeremy McNichols, Alexander Madison, George Holani, and now Rashad White. Still, even with that in mind, I'm inclined to argue in favor of him as a top 5 running back.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so I think it's a little bit of flavor. He's
also a freak, by the way. I forgot to mention that. Freak athlete.
Yeah, he's very athletic, and he breaks tackles. I do think there's probably a little bit among NFL teams and just scouts of just wanting to stay away from that whole ASU situation, which is a bit of a dumpster fire right now in terms of the coaching staff. And I mean, you have a former NFL coach as in Herman Edwards at ASU, so you would think that these teams are able to get as much access to Rashad White as they would want. But that whole offense was a bit of an issue in general. So, I mean, I personally like Rashad White, and I think.
What do you mean the offense was an issue? You mean like easy, very scheme driven? That maybe Rashad White's production is a little fraudulent.
Yeah, I think they really struggled to manufacture, I guess, easy yards, and I think Rashad White, he's really good. But sorry, he's really good in space, and he was able to they were able to do somewhat to help him out. But I think in general, the offensive issues that you watch ASU, which was a tough watch, right, this year. And Rashad White, he's certainly was a bell cow, right? And again, I'm not trying to make Rashad White into something he's not, because I think he's an awesome player, and I think he's certainly worthy of being RB3, RB4, RB5. But I just think in general, NFL teams may be wary of that situation in general. Even though,
but I mean, if the
Rashad White
offense was a dumpster fire, but White's numbers were fairly incredible, isn't that just a further testament to him and his ability?
Scott, I mean, Benjamin's were great, and we weren't at all. So I mean, that offense has been weird for a couple of years now.
Yeah, I think that's just something to consider. Again, it's not. I don't think. Again, Rashad White is a better athlete than Benjamin was, and a better receiver as well. I don't know that it's not a super fair comp. But I think in general, that just entire team, there's just if you watch college football, you see what's wrong with the ASU, and it's tough to put your finger on because they have so much talent. I mean, they were a top 15 team at one point this year, and they just completely fell off.
And by the way, David is in Arizona, so yeah, he knows his Arizona football. That's for sure. So, and that's where Breece Hall came from. So that's another factor there.
But yeah, again, I'm not trying to and I don't necessarily disagree with you. You would think that, hey, Rashad White is going off in this offense, and that's something to consider. But they also were just a very poor offense, even with his ridiculous production, which you would think his ridiculous production would vaunt that offense over, and just wasn't really the case for whatever reason.
Yeah, they had serious issues at quarterback. They had issues. I mean, they had a couple of guys that could catch the ball, but no real playmakers on the roster. So I mean, they were limited, big time limited, and Rashad White. I mean, he was basically the entire Arizona State offense there last year, which was really disappointing because Chip Trainium, who transferred to Ohio State, now he's playing linebacker. He's not even a running back anymore. But Dave, wasn't he the biggest recruit that they brought in I don't know how many years?
Oh yeah, Demontre Trent was a massive recruit, and now he's playing linebacker for Ohio State. So that tells you all you kind of need to know about kind of how they're utilizing players and how they're growing players as well. So that could be a big concern for NFL teams, not necessarily. I know from a production standpoint, it looks great statistically, but there's obviously something we're missing. If NFL teams are, and maybe something NFL teams are missing too. But there's obviously something, right, that's somebody is missing. And it's important to kind of dig in and figure out what that might be.
Well, I mean, we heard just tons of stuff about Rashad White at the Senior Bowl, and I'm not going to discount that. I mean, we heard the same thing with Denzel Mims, and that obviously it's starting to look. It didn't age very well. I mean, it's starting to look pretty bad now. But I'm not ready to toss that aside yet about Rashad White.
You heard what? I think the Senior Bowl
about Rashad White just being, I mean, the most explosive player there. I mean, he ran circles around every running back that was at the Senior Bowl. I mean, his production in the game and in practice was just ridiculous. His efficiency, his route running. Just look at the clips, and I mean, oh my gosh, he's I mean, leaving linebackers standing still with his sharp routes. I mean, this guy was just phenomenal at the Senior Bowl. So I'm not ready to call him the 2022 version of Denzel Mims. I think he's got it. I think he's going to be a player in the NFL. And we've seen. I mean, so we just assume that NFL teams know what they're doing. But if that's true, then why are guys going undrafted and then coming in and turning in, great seasons? I mean, if you just look at quarterback, I mean, I think we should have lost. We should have NFL teams have basically really damaged their reputation in evaluating quarterbacks. I mean, it's pretty sad looking at some of the guys where they're drafted. And we think, okay, well, the NFL must know something that we don't. Well, I'm going to break the news to you that that's not true. They are just as dumb as we are, and they draft the wrong players, right? So there will be guys in this draft class that deserve to be drafted, possibly day 2, day 3, that will go undrafted, and then later, oh, look at this guy. Wow, he's a great player. They put him into the fold, and he just bursts right through. And you're like, well, what the heck? Why wasn't he drafted? And that's because these teams, I mean, they assign scouts to certain players and they ignore other people. They don't do thorough draft scouting, and a lot of people slip through the cracks. I'm not saying it's going to happen with Rashad White. I hope it doesn't. But if it does, I mean, there's going to be a lucky team out there to pick up a pimp UDFA.
I think price is also important to bring this back to kind of like fantasy. And like if you're talking Rashad White as RB3, like that's fine. I don't know that I'm super like bullish on taking Rashad White at the end of like round 1. You know, like I don't know that I'd like love that price, especially for a guy. If NFL teams are low and you're looking at a guy who's going to be drafted in the 5th, 6th, 7th, you know, right, like that, right? And so now you're looking at somebody who has a struggle towards playing time, and that's the biggest thing, right? You need a guy who gets on the field. But if you're looking at Rashad White as, you know, RB 5, 6, 7, you're looking at, you know, mid to end of round 2, early round 3, right? Now you can get kind of bit on board. So I think price is really important, especially when you're talking about a lot of these, you know, RB3 to RB8, right? You know, you're going to see a lot of variance, and where you take these guys and or what you trade for them is pretty important.
One thing, Wes, to piggyback off your thing, you're right. I mean, the NFL in general, you know, I you know, it's drafting is not a science by any means, and we have to measure a lot of this through the lens of like incentives, right? A lot of these GMs, a lot of these coaches, they know that they're on like it's year to year with all these guys. And one of the main reasons for our game for fantasy that draft capital like highly correlates over the long run to career fantasy points per game is simply sunk cost. Like these guys continue to get opportunities, you know, 2nd or 3rd round running back that might have a 5th round, 6th round grade for us or for other teams. They keep going back to that well because they spent that 2nd round pick. They have to be proven right. They have to be proven that they spent the right, 49th overall pick on this guy. So while you're right, sure, it's the NFL draft's a crapshoot. It's extremely hard to consistently draft well year over year. It's really, really hard to pull off like what John Schneider and the Seahawks did in that stretch in 2011, 2012, 2013, whatever. But like, yeah, in general, like we do have to come back and look at draft capital and look at where these guys are drafted because there is, a massive sunk cost fallacy kind of involved in all of it. And I think this running back class in particular is real interesting when it comes to that because, we started the whole show like 3 through 10, you could list them in any order right now. And I honestly probably wouldn't, fight you over any of it. So, yeah, I think day 2 of the draft is going to be real interesting between the backs and the receivers that go in that range.
Well, I will say though, Scott, I haven't even watched Isaiah Spiller's tape yet. I was waiting for his pro day numbers to come in, so I don't want to give the impression that I have like RB3 like locked in right now as my tentative.
I have watched Spiller, and he is not a volume runner at all. Like he's a good receiver, but he is not going to be a volume. Wes, he's like he looks, he weighed in at what 207, 210, something like that. He looks 190, and he runs hard. He has like
he ran a 4.63 at his pro day.
Dude, he has
sub 20%.
Yeah, no, I have all that.
The production wasn't great. Like my model said, RB, I don't know, 7 maybe it was RB6. Like, I mean, solid numbers as a freshman, but then basically the exact same numbers as a sophomore and junior. Not superior to Travion Williams numbers the previous 3 seasons. Didn't wow by any meaningful efficiency metrics PFF has to offer. I don't know. Dave, what do you think?
About Spiller? I mean, I think just staying away from any Jimbo Fisher-led offense is usually a pretty good strategy.
Why is that?
It's an antiquated system. Everybody is spreading out, and Jimbo Fisher is all about 2 yards in a cloud of dust. I think,
so you're staying off of a Devin Ashane.
Well, I was just going to mention that.
Okay, yeah.
I was just going to say that Isaiah Spiller may be the lesser talent in that backfield in this draft.
Yeah. I think.
And you look at the speed of Ashane.
Yeah,
but in general,
probably the fastest player in college football, and he's at 185 pounds. I mean, he's not little.
Yeah, but in general, Jimbo tends to just get a lot of talent and not really. He just doesn't develop it. They just had the Damon DeMoss is the what was he, number 1 or number 2 in the class?
Yeah,
a year or two ago, and he's gone.
Baylor Cup gone,
and he's Baylor, like, so, and he was in Baylor Cup was a 5-star tight end. Those guys. I mean,
there were comps to Travis Kelce for Baylor Cup. He's gone. Yeah. He's leaving.
And you look at through the history. I mean, I think the 2 hits are going to be Jameis Winston and Travis Benjamin. Those are the 2 hits.
And Dalvin. Yeah.
Oh, Dalvin Cook. I forgot about Dalvin Cook. But I forgot about Dalvin Cook.
Yeah. No. Speaking of Dalvin Cook, go ahead, Graham.
No, I was just going to say you're right though. When I was watching Spiller, I mean that was one of the things that it just pisses me off is like just literally stop running into loaded boxes. Like count on your hands. You got 2 extra defenders that are not accounted for with your tight ends, your blocking team, whatever. Count. maybe check into a pass. Like Texas, you're right. Texas A&M is like a boomer offense, like just total boomer. It was frustrating. Jimbo still does the same shit that made Dalvin Cook really good. Like zone stuff, like some of the zone stuff is really good, and it's just good stuff. But in general, the offense itself was stuck in 2006 for sure.
It's really hard to do when you don't have Dalvin Cook.
Yeah.
No. And I think in general, you look at kind of Texas A&M, you look at the pro day numbers this year and the combine numbers, and everybody just tested poorly. I mean, people had Jalen Watermeyer being tight end 1 this year. Guy ran over a 5-second 40.
He's like
he's not getting drafted.
He's like a Nick Boyle blocking tight end prospect, and he's not a good blocker, right? Wait a minute.
No.
Yeah. He falls outside of a lot of barriers that teams look at tight end. They're saying to themselves, you've got to test at least here for us to even give you our attention. And if you don't, we're just going to take you off our board. And Watermeyer's off the board, and a lot of people. So I do want to switch. So we're talking about Dalvin Cook. We're talking about guys just running into loaded boxes. So that reminds me of Zamir White. And so we're talking about Dalvin Cook. So what do we think about James Cook here? Because I got to say, when I watched all of his 21 tape, I love his burst. I love his acceleration. He's not going to come in and take over a backfield. And at a certain point, though, we're not going to get bell cows. I mean, seriously, we added an extra game last year. And even before that, we were at the point where almost no running backs make it through an entire season unscathed, and we're adding another game to that. And so we're going to see more timeshares here. It's just how it's going to be. It's the nature of the path that the NFL is on. And so I feel like we're going to have to just open up our view, because there's going to be maybe 2 or 3 bell cows in the NFL at a certain point. Especially, you go back to last year, you look at Najee. I mean, he was great. I don't know. No matter how you measure it, he may not have been efficient, but he was great in fantasy. And then he dislocated his elbow, tried to come back the next game, obviously was not the same player. I think everybody, it doesn't matter if you're Najee Harris, Breece Hall, anybody, you get into the NFL and you play a full season and you realize, wow, this is going to be hard to do over the extent of my career. We're going to have to settle for situations where you're in a 60-40 timeshare. And I think a guy like James Cook with his receiving skills, oh my goodness, look at his snaps where he's lining up against SEC slot corners and he's beating them. Right? This guy has got it all. I mean, he may not have the size. That's about where it's at, at only 204 pounds. But, man, I was in love with James Cook. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I mean, it's the size. I mean, he's 204, but he it's one of those things where, like, if you're just looking at weight, like 204, you're like, all right, he's probably a change of pace back, but he looks smaller than that. And he plays smaller than that, too. And that's my concern. I mean, I'm like Scott, like, I love, I chart over 2,000 carries every year. I watch over 5,000 snaps of these guys. Like, I love watching, but I'm like Scott, at the end of the day, like, I want to project roles for fantasy. And for me, James Cook is going to always be like a change of pace, third down, kind of like gadget back. And he's going to be highly, highly scheme specific. And, that's kind of like, when I'm going through and ranking these guys, like I like James Cook's tape too. I'm in the middle of charting him and Zamir White. I've gotten through like 3 or 4 games. But at the end of the day, like Brian Robinson has much higher bell cow workhorse potential than James Cook.
You guys keep getting hung up on Brian Robinson. Okay, so Christian McCaffrey's 205 pounds, right? How are we gonna? But I get it. No, I watched a lot of James. I watched every one of his snaps. You tackle him low, he goes down. He doesn't have the legs. He doesn't have the lower body to carry guys or anything.
Right.
But what I'm saying though is I see low upside with Brian Robinson. I get it. He's a bigger guy. I was not blown away by his athleticism. To be honest, I wasn't blown away by the player up until this past year. I thought he was. I didn't think he was your prototypical Alabama running back. Just I'm not saying he's gonna face plant or anything. I'm just saying, he's big and that's great. But there's a lot of guys. I mean, that we could throw into that category that aren't going to be good NFL running backs. I think that there's a line you have to draw between a guy as he fits a certain idea of who I think is going to be a good running back and who are actually good running backs. I think
he's a good running back though. Like I think he's a really good player, and I think look, man, he was stuck behind Najee Harris. He was stuck behind all these super talented Bama backs. He stuck it out. I mean, he was a 5th-year senior. The production obviously wasn't great in his 4 years before that, but he got his opportunity this year. He was a bell cow, and I mean, he played every single down for them. I think he can run man. I think he can run zone. I think his burst is much better than anybody I've seen really give him credit for. I think he's got, like, it would not surprise me if he's the number 3 back off the board. It would not surprise me at all.
I would be stunned.
I think it's important with a lot of these guys, and you look at their skill set, especially when you're talking about kind of RB3, you're talking about, end of day 3 probably picks, end of day 2, day 3 picks. You really need paths to playing time for these guys to hit. Like that's the big deal. Like that's kind of what you hit, and that's why Scott has no interest in these guys, because they may not even see the field. And so I think you look at somebody like James Cook and you look at like his paths to playing time, and it's basically going to be like ceiling is what McKissick kind of.
Yeah.
Kind of, he's just a receiving guy. He's there, and like if you're lucky, like that's what you get out of it. And then you look at somebody like Brian Robinson, who I think as a player may not have as strong of one skill as like James Cook with the receiving. But I could easily see an NFL team, right, saying, "Hey, we have this kind of up and flux backfield, and we have a guy in Brian Robinson who can kind of do it all. He can do 3 downs. Maybe he doesn't do any of them particularly great. Maybe he's not like all that great, but hey, maybe we'll give him 10, 15 carries, and we'll give him 2 or 3 targets a game and see how he does, because he's able to just step into that role. And especially when you're talking about these kind of end of, these not high picks. You're not the Breece Halls or the Kenneth Walkers of the world. You're just hoping that somebody can step into there. And I think that's kind of where the Brian Robinson loves come from. I don't think you're going to expect him to be Breece Hall or Kenneth Walker or even get that opportunity. But when you look at paths to that, I think you would trust somebody more to get there, like Breece Hall like Brian Robinson, as opposed to somebody like James Cook, whose role is going to be limited.
Right. I wanted to ask you guys, because Wes and Scott, I had the privy of looking at your ranks before anybody else does. You guys have Jerome Ford, Cincinnati, back like way lower than the rest of the staff. Scott, why are you so low on Ford here?
I just haven't got there yet. I'm still like a few days away from finalizing the lower tiers of my rankings. I just copied Wes on that one.
I was just curious.
Don't put it on me, Scott Barrett.
He's a size speed guy. I thought he'd pop for you a little bit.
I mean, he had a great junior season last year.
Yeah, he's a size guy, but
he underperformed at the combine for what it's worth.
Oh, really? Big time. Time.
He was expected to be close to a 4.3 guy.
Yeah, and no explosion.
4.46 is pretty damn good at 210.
It is, but he was expected to be the fastest guy in the class. It's good, but like they had, I think Randall had odds, and he was the favorite for a good amount of time to be the fastest guy. And so And he's a former Bama back as well. And again, like, so 4.46, yeah, it's good. But again, like, I think expectations is important with these guys, and you look at kind of like who they are and where they're going. So he was expected to be kind of like a high 4.3 guy or a low 4.4 guy. Instead, he's a mid 4.4, and that's on the combine track, which was pretty fast this year.
Yeah,
so
they put down new turf, and I mean everybody was running fast. Like the D line groups, like, you know, looking at those numbers, they were insanely fast this year. So, yeah.
Well, you know, I hear that. I heard that last year when we just had the pro days. But then when I'm comparing the numbers between pro days from 2021 and then what we saw in 2022 and then going back further, I mean, it's pretty average. Nobody was faster in 2021. Nobody. There may have been some faster guys this year, like you say, at D line, and there were. Jordan Davis. I mean,
that could just be the class 2 West. This class.
Yeah. But I will say for Jerome Ford, man, 23rd percentile vertical.
That's bad.
That's bad. That's Brian Robinson level, and you don't weigh what Brian Robinson weighs. But I will say though, and I agree with you. I think that there's an opportunity for guys that are on the bigger end, that they have an opportunity for the early down, for the short yardage, for the goal line stuff. I'm not gonna throw Brian Robinson into an opportunity where he's gonna be like a passing down back or up tempo back. But in that mold, I also saw guys like Hassan Haskins, and and this is a guy that maybe none of you guys are gonna agree with, Kevin Harris. I love Kevin Harris at South Carolina. I hate the fact that Hassan Haskins, he's got an ankle injury. I was watching his tape. I think he hurt it in the Big Ten championship against Iowa, and then I don't think he said anything because they're about to go to the playoffs, and he did not look like the same back against Georgia. But what do you guys think about Kevin Harris? Because I thought he looked really good testing. I mean, obviously he didn't do full testing, but we didn't see that from any back. Nobody did full testing at the combine. But I'm he didn't have the breakout year this past year that he had the year before when he led the SEC in rushing. But I love this guy, man. He's a guy that can. I mean, he can not only carry guys through the middle, but he can get to the edge, man. He's got some speed, and he pulled his hamstring on his 40 time at the pro day. But what do you guys think about Kevin Harris? If any of you have seen tape on him,
I haven't watched him.
Yeah, so I think a lot of the guys you mentioned are interesting, and a lot of them have a similarity where a lot of them have, I think, questions as a receiver, and a lot of them were also used as bell cows. So we're used as a 2-down bell cow. So I think, for like Hassan Haskins, you can even throw Kenneth Walker in the mix of this. Like, are those guys not really receivers, or is it because that they're used so frequently on first and second down that the way to spell them was on third down, right? Because I think Haskins had a pretty good had a couple good receiving games, but Corum and even the true freshman Donovan Edwards used a lot. They got a lot of the receiving work, but it's not like Haskins not able to do that. And like somebody like Harris, I think is injury riddled. He had back
surgery prior to last year.
He had back surgery, and they worked him back really slowly. He led the SEC in rushing last year and was a monster.
So again, just my strategy in fantasy, like this question is of massive importance. We all know that targets in PPR leagues are worth 2.64 times as much as a carry. So you really want the multifaceted backs who are capable of doing both. And so I've seen other people who use advanced models look at things like reception and reception share, but that doesn't factor into my model at all. I mean, like there's so many running backs who were heavily utilized in the passing game, the NFL, who were totally neglected in college. That list includes LaDainian Tomlinson, Ray Rice, Le'Veon Bell, Darren Sproles. And then, of course, more recently, Melvin Gordon, Jonathan Taylor, and A.J. Dillon. So you have to dig in deeper into the numbers with, A.J. Dillon, Melvin Gordon. Obviously, that's a scheme thing. They just never use their running backs in the passing game. I was actually a little bit pessimistic on Jonathan Taylor just because there were reports since he was a sophomore that all he was working on was improving as a pass catcher. The coach set aside a full hour after every single practice of him watching tape of Melvin Gordon catch passes in the NFL, and that's all he was working on. And still, underwhelming production as a junior or sophomore, and then just a little bit better as a junior. But with Kenneth Walker specifically, I really do think this is a scheme thing because his head coach at Wake Forest was Dave Clawson, and Clawson has never used a running back in the passing game, never. Since he joined the team in 2014, they're dead last in reception and receiving yards. Their running backs with like twice as much to 2.5 as much below the league average rate. No running back had over 143 receiving yards. And so I think it just sort of makes sense that he went to Michigan State and he didn't have much experience there. And as Wes talked about in his article, I mean, the guy was insanely productive as a pass catcher and insanely efficient in high school. So I really do think there's some untapped potential there with Walker specifically. But and another thing too is like elite rushing production is indicative of future NFL pass catching success, because at least that we know is going to get you on the field. Some of these other guys have far more question marks. Greg Cassell said he thought the two best pass catchers in this class were Rashad White and James Cook after Breece Hall.
Breece Hall?
Maybe. I don't remember the specifics, but I think that sort of makes sense. James Cook in particular had a really high percentage of his receiving yards come on wide receiver routes, which is something I really like to see. Yards per route run, missed tackles forced per reception, or a few other metrics I tend to look at and value more than raw receptions. Like Clyde Edwards-Helaire is a great example. Insanely high number of receptions, but insanely poor levels of missed tackles forced per reception.
Something to note. I was listening to the Move the Sticks podcast with Daniel Jeremiah, and he's talking about Kenneth Walker, and he apparently asked Michigan State what's the deal with Kenneth Walker's receptions, and they sent him back practice footage of him and his receiving ability, and basically he likes whatever he saw so much that he bumped him from unranked on his rankings to, I think he's like 31st now, one spot behind Breece Hall.
Yeah.
So like that's a pretty massive bump. And again, like I've never seen the tape, and so it's something to take maybe with a grain of salt. But like clearly, like there's some buzz, or at least around Walker's receiving ability, that it may be there just because we haven't seen it.
So I thought just his game tape, just his receiving game tape was good enough to consider him a good receiver. I didn't see anything, as far as that goes with the opportunities that he had. I thought more than anything, it looked like a lot of the throws to him were off target. I think I charted at least from this past year, at least half of the throws to him were off target. So, and he's catching outside of his frame here. So I think he's showing us something there. And then when he catches the ball, he turns, and I mean, he's the same guy that we see when he takes a handoff. I think that there's a big gap between we look at the data and we say, okay, this guy didn't catch the ball ever. Like what's the problem? And then there's what actually the player is capable of. And I think trying to get closer to that, it's just really difficult. Because we only have the footage that's available.
Wes, you know who Kenneth Walker reminds me of? Is Joe Mixon. Like a smaller, shiftier Joe Mixon. Like he has that like same like hesitation, jump cut, explode, burst. Like, I mean, he is one of the best like instinctual runners at finding space and creating space that I've seen in a really, really long time. Like there's some. Joe Mixon still is like number one in yards created for me, and he always will be. I don't think anybody's ever going to get to the number that Mixon did, but I mean, I think there's a lot of similarities in the way that Walker and Mixon run. And to that point, I mean, we've been wanting Mixon to have a huge receiving role, and every time he's actually been involved, getting 4 or 5 targets a game, like we've loved the results. And, I think at the end of the day, Wes, I saw the same thing that you did with Walker, man. It's like He catches the ball away from his body, check. He doesn't let the ball get into his chest, which Brian Robinson, by the way, did a bunch. He catches the ball away from his body, gets upfield quick. Like, just because a guy doesn't do it in college doesn't mean he can't do it. And I think in our space, in our little fantasy world, people get so like they get so trapped, I think, in times in like things that they can actually put their finger on. Like in production is the easiest thing we can put our finger on. I've found myself plenty of times, like AJ Dillon, Scott, you mentioned him. I mean, he was a great reference in this case. Like, I did not think Dillon was a very good pass catcher, but that doesn't mean he can't do it. And just last year, we saw, Dillon was fantastic in the screen game, the dump off game, and he's going to continue to be a big part of that. So everything that I saw, Wes, I saw the same thing that you did. I think Walker's gonna be a good pass catcher.
It's funny you mentioned Dillon, Scott, because if I remember correctly, we were having a little debate about Dillon this past year, and I happened to throw some data at you on Jamal Williams and Dillon, and I was trying to make the argument. I'm telling you, man, AJ Dillon can catch the ball, and it took you a while to buy in there. So it's funny that you mentioned that.
Yeah, I mean, John was hammering that point since he talked to him at the combine, and now I definitely think he's right. Although you talk to Brett Whitefield, and you'd think AJ Dillon's one of the worst running backs in football. The guy is miscast and should be a linebacker, but
I thought Dillon. I was completely about Dillon too, man. I mean, I was.
It's funny he says that though, because that's like Chip Trainium, the guy we were talking about at Arizona State, similar body type, and I bet you AJ Dillon would be pimp at linebacker.
Yeah, he may be better. That doesn't mean he's not good at running back too, right? Like,
yeah, exactly.
There's a couple guys in this running back class who are former linebackers turned running.
Well, and then you look at like Abram Smith. He did play linebacker until this year. Right. I'm really intrigued that
another one.
What's that? Excuse me.
Tyler Algier is another one.
Yeah, exactly. Actually, I didn't know about him. There's another one that I'll try to think of while we're talking. There's another one that played linebacker. I'll come up with him though. It was Hassan Haskins. Hassan Haskins switched to linebacker early and then switched back to running back.
Wes,
I don't know.
Tyler
Algier had more tackles as a linebacker as he did carries in his 2019 season.
By the way, Tyler Algier's like top comp on Mock Draftable, which sometimes I don't really buy into this, but his top comp is Eddie Lacy.
I gotta say, I was not. I think he's got some potential. He's a big guy. I think he's got that going for him. But the athleticism really let me down with Tyler Algier. I'm not buying into it. I'm going to let everyone else make that mistake.
Yeah, he's a borderline.
He was my RB3 before adjusting for his level of competition, and then after adjustment, he fell a few spots, and then after the athleticism, which I had as just barely above average. Ideal size for sure, but just barely above average athleticism. He fell a few more spots. So.
Yeah. You would be in the business of drafting big, slow running backs.
My platter fetish, Graham.
What's that?
My platter fetish.
Hey, who was it? Peyton Hillis. He's the Cleveland running back?
Yeah.
I mean,
one of my
just a massive
guy. Scott would pull up. He would send me YouTube clips at 2:30 in the morning of LeGarrette Blount just powering through defensive linemen, man.
But he was such a unique talent. LeGarrette Blount was. He was a guy that had the footwork that you see from a lot of the Oklahoma running backs, and that it's rare. It's not very common. It's Ramondre Stevenson, like you said, Joe Mixon, but Joe Mixon has so much else going for him. But like Ramondre Stevenson, and it's another guy like Kennedy Brooks. This guy's got like the tiniest hands in the past 10 seasons. I think the only guy that had smaller hands than him was the guy that was at Louisville last year that didn't even Javian Hawkins. Javian Hawkins.
Oh, right.
He had some little Burger King mitts last year, but if you look past expecting Kennedy Brooks to catch passes, man, this guy can ball out as a runner. I mean, he has got some moves, some setup. He's got the entire package. Love this kid. He's just not going to ever catch more than like 2 passes in an NFL season. It's never going to happen. And that's one of the things that I really liked about Breece Hall is he's got some oven mitts for hands, like massive hands. And I think there's a lot more to hand size comparable to body size. And I feel like when you have guys with like little tiny hands and that, they got this big frame with these little tiny hands, they're just not going to catch the ball, and you rarely see guys with these tiny hands comparable to their body size turning into NFL receiving running backs. It just doesn't happen. But go ahead.
I like Kennedy Brooks. I think I'm going to have him a lot or fairly higher than consensus.
Mm-hmm.
He's really interesting to me. I will just say, like, this entire conversation is at least a more relevant one than for wide receivers and tight ends, just in the sense that draft capital and landing spot is so uniquely important at the running back position that it makes like pre-draft analysis fairly less worthwhile. But I will say with Kennedy Brooks in particular, I won't penalize him too much for low draft capital, just because it does seem that a lot of that's going to be because of off the field concerns.
Yeah. For Kennedy Brooks.
Yeah. Am I wrong?
No, he had some issues at the beginning of the COVID year.
Yeah, he missed the whole 2020 season.
He
opted out, but he had some, I think, domestic violence issues.
Yeah,
that he was never
really.
charged
I never heard about this.
But there was an incident at Oklahoma, and I think he was briefly suspended, and then he decided to opt out for the season, and that was the end of that.
He led that backfield before all of that, right, Dave?
So Kennedy Brooks is sort of funny because whenever he gets the ball in his hands, he just makes people miss. Like, it's like you watch him and he just does. And he's the reason Trey Sermon transferred. Like, everybody was on Eric Gray this year. Everybody thought he was going to be a big Debbie breakout because he's a former 5-star. And Kennedy Brooks just usurped him and became the guy.
Ran circles around him.
Yeah. But before the year, everyone thought Eric Gray was going to be the breakout, and he was going to take over that backfield. And Kenny Brooks seems to outperform a lot of the more athletic guys in that backfield. So it's just sort of because he's very clearly not you watch him. He's definitely a plotter, and you're kind of how are people missing this guy? But he gets it done, and he was probably the best part of that. Or one of the best parts of that Oklahoma offense this year.
All right, we got to talk receivers here, guys. We did an hour on the backs. Let's start with receivers.
Let's just break the seal here. I mean, there could literally be 12, 13, 14 wide receivers in the first 2 rounds.
Yeah. I think there'll be 6 in the first round, at least a solid 5 or 6, and then a ton.
5 or 6. Yeah, I think 5 or 6. You'll see. I think it depends how teams feel about Jahan Dotson, and I guess how teams feel about probably Treylon Burks at this point.
Scott hates Jahan Dotson, by the way.
I don't hate. I just think I'm going to be lower on him. The BMI is.
You think? I can tell you, I know you're going to be lower on him than 99% of the population.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I mean, production model liked him. It just didn't love him, but definitely liked him.
The athleticism was a bit of a concern. I thought he tested a little bit better than he did.
And he was skinny. He was so skinny too.
Yeah, he showed out a little bit. I mean, he's got some strength. He showed at the bench. I mean, what did he do there? Let's see here.
The bench is weirdly not.
I know. And
no.
I'm not
wide
putting too much
receivers, it's weirdly not insignificant.
Yeah, it is, because I mean you got to be able to push off. You've got to, and if you want to get off the line in a jam, you've got to be able to at least defend yourself. And he did 15. So I mean, that's more than I could do, So, but that's not. I'm not gonna. But seriously, I mean, so we got a lot of guys though that are coming in from the group of 5 that have a lot of potential here. Like, if you were talking athleticism, I mean, Alec Pierce is right there next to everybody. I mean, there's this
Martavis Bryant clone.
Yeah, I mean, this guy's like a athletic phenomenon. It's ridiculous.
Man, Martavis Bryant should have been an
absolute. And do you know who my comp is for Graham Barfield? Right now it's David Foster Wallace. Look at that haircut.
Oh no, dude! Am I
the only one who thinks he looks like David Foster Wallace right now?
Are you showing a picture or something?
Business in the front, party in the back.
I can't say anything. I take my hat off. I'm bald. I mean, I'm not completely, but I try to tell myself that. But yeah, I'm bald.
Bald is beautiful. Well, I'll be there in like 6 years.
I will say this. I want to add this about Dave. He's a prop guy. So, I would like.
He's like Carrot Top.
No, he's a prop guy. Yeah, that's exactly what he is. No, his NFL props.
I got him not like Carrot Top.
I mean, Dave, how much money do you win each year in on your draft props and your Heisman Trophy props and your random props all over the place? This guy's got like investments going in 20 different directions. It's ridiculous, but he comes through and he brings home money.
Write some articles for us, Dave.
I mean, seriously, tell us a little bit about your prop history here, Dave.
Yeah, well, part of the reason I don't write articles is I prefer to bet instead of write the articles.
He's like, I prefer not to answer that question.
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, no, in general, I mean, I really find the NFL draft is one of my favorite things to bet on because the information is out there. So I know Wes is a big he's a big evaluation guy, and the evaluations matter. But when you're betting the NFL draft, they don't really matter. Like NFL teams, that's what matters. So when you look at kind of how NFL teams view this stuff, that's kind of what I've dived into, right? It doesn't matter what your model says. It doesn't matter what, Graham's or Scott's model says or Wes's evaluations. It just doesn't really matter in terms of betting the NFL, in terms of the draft. And so that's one of the areas that I find so interesting. And it leads me down interesting paths, I guess, when evaluating this guy, and especially when bring it back a little bit to fantasy. It really makes it so draft capital for me is a huge part of it because I have, I think, a pretty good idea of where these guys are going to go and how NFL teams view them. And I think that's a huge part of this stuff, and that's really hard to quantify, especially if you're putting into a model. But I think it's a massive part, and I think when you look at this wide receiver, to bring it back to the wide receivers, and just in general, it leads you down interesting paths. I mean, if we ever get to the quarterbacks, we can. I have some takes about the quarterback class in particular, but in terms of wide receivers, and you look at kind of where the NFL or how the NFL views them in terms of draft props, it's pretty much two guys I would say at the top. Yep. I would put one ahead of the other one, pretty firmly, personally, in terms of how the NFL teams view them. And then you look at and you take a look at also where fantasy guys are, and you see some pretty big differences. In particular, I think Treylon Burks is kind of, when you talk about fantasy, I think that's kind of where the wide receiver conversation needs to start. I think if you're looking at where he goes, I think is a big part of probably his fantasy value, because I think before the combine, people were saying he was wide receiver 1, clearly wide receiver 1.
What were you saying?
I think wide receiver 2, wide receiver 3. I've always been Garrett Wilson.
I was about to say, this guy pissed me off in too many Devy leagues. I didn't get Garrett Wilson anywhere because of this guy right here. I'm going to say this about Garrett Wilson. His testing is off. His vertical, right now is off. They need to retest him at some point because this guy can jump out of the gym.
I've seen it.
I was absolutely stunned that he only had a 36. I was stunned, but I was also surprised he ran 4.3. So I was surprised he ran faster than Chris Olave. But I've been a Garrett Wilson truther since.
So everyone talks about the fast track this year and the numbers being off. This was far and away the fastest wide receiver combine ever. But the thing is, if you weight adjust it, it was a perfectly average combine. And what makes me nervous or optimistic with Burks is everyone's pushing him down after the combine, but it wasn't a bad combine.
No, I'm not pushing him down because of the combine. I'm pushing him down because he's raw at this point.
So let me get to that in just 1 second. Okay. His sports score, which is my athleticism model, said he was more athletic than Garrett Wilson. You weight adjust the 40, which you need to. It was better than Garrett Wilson's. who also has size and BMI concerns. But to Wes's point, I'm friends with two PFF guys, one former PFF guy, John Costco and Brett Whitefield, who told me, no. Treylon Burks is not a top 5 wide receiver in this class. This is before the combine. I'm like, what? You're out of your mind. Like these numbers are obscene. And they were saying, no. He is extremely raw. He's really inconsistent on tape. For a guy his size, he was far too often getting tackled on first contact by future insurance salesmen at Baylor. So inconsistent. His highlight reel is incredible, but outside of that, not so much. Really, the only thing he has going for him is he's a freak athlete. And then the combine said he was, maybe a 66 percentile athlete, but not a freak. And so then within that context, it makes sense that he falls, because otherwise I'm all over combine fallers, especially at the wide receiver position, because athleticism doesn't really matter for wide receivers, but maybe in this instance, it really does.
So
I'm not even.
So I think there. So for me, I think a big part, something to realize with Treylon Burks is he played his last snap at Arkansas at 240 pounds. Like, wow. So he was a big dude. So a big part of this draft process has really been on him cutting down, and then I think now he's at 225, right? And that's probably because I think that's where he wants to play. So how much of the draft process, how much of his athleticism?
If he could put up the same numbers at 240, like
right, that's sort of my like. So again, I think before the class he's wide receiver 1. Like I think that was too rich, and I think again if you're able to draft him at wide receiver 5 in a fantasy draft, I think that's a really good price and a really good value for a guy who, I think he gets a lot of Deebo Samuel comps. I think there's only one Deebo Samuel, and I don't know that I'd go there.
So there was Mike McCarthy. Go ahead.
Sorry. He can be used as a kind of gadget guy, and he is the guy in this class who I would say is probably best suited for maybe that more gadget role. Who we've seen kind of from I think last, it was like kind of Rondale Moore was, last class, kind of that guy who can just kind of be used in a lot of different ways. He can kind of be used as a kind of like a Swiss Army knife. But again, I think price really matters with him.
So Mike McCarthy was asked at the combine if he saw the next Deebo Samuel in this draft class, and he was like, guys, please stop asking me that. He was like, if you go back to before Deebo Samuel was drafted, did the 49ers know Deebo Samuel was Deebo Samuel? They had no clue. No clue. Right? They had none.
I don't think Shanahan knew Deebo could do that role until Mitchell got hurt.
Yeah, it was out of necessity.
I don't know. I'm counting at least 4 Deebo Samuels in this draft class.
I will never use that comp for the rest of my lifetime.
Some donkey head coaches like Cliff Kingsbury are going to try to shoehorn one of these guys.
Well, yeah. He said Rondale's his new Debo. Yeah. Wandell Robinson's the new Debo. Everyone's the new Debo.
Everyone's the new Debo, right? Yeah.
Just like for 3 years.
Tyreek Hill.
Andy Isabella's Tyreek Hill.
And Patrick Mahomes, the next Zach Wilson's the next Patrick Mahomes. Because, I will say this. I'm passing on Treylon Burks and I'm passing on Jahan Dotson because if I have that pick, I'm trading back because I want to take guys a little further back. If I can't get the top end guys, because I want Christian Watson, and I mean, were we going to address the fact that he posted the fastest 20 split and 10-yard split in at least the past 10 years? Where are you
getting that, Wes?
From the numbers that were at the combine.
Do they post 10-yard splits?
Yeah, they have 10-yard splits. Yeah, they have all that stuff.
I haven't seen 10-yard splits.
Okay, I'll give you a website. They have everything.
Yeah. Shoot me the link.
Yeah. And then another guy I like a lot is Sky Moore. So I think instead of trying to say
I saw, according to Daniel Jeremiah's sources or whatever, Sky Moore had the best 10-yard split in 6 years and also the biggest hands in the class.
10-yard split. He had a 97th percentile 10-yard split 86th percentile.
Yeah,
20
please send me wherever you're getting that, because I haven't found reliable sources.
Yeah, no, I have a reliable source for all of this. So Chris Olave, he also posted a 1.45 10-yard split, which matched Christian Watson for the 100th percentile. But Christian Watson posted the fastest. Well, Chris Olave was at 98th percentile. But Christian Watson, 2.45 in the 20-yard split. I mean, this guy can blaze. I mean, just burn down the field. And then on top of that, you want to talk about big hands. Where is it? Christian Watson, he's got just massive hands, 10 and 1/8 inch hands, 73rd percentile. But yeah, Sky Moore, he's sitting at 10 and 3/8 inch hands. So he's got bigger hands, and he's 5'10", 191 pounds compared to Christian Watson, who's at 6'4", 208 pounds. So I'm not arguing for either or. I'm saying I love both of these guys, and I'll pass on whatever question marks are surrounding Treylon Burks. And I like Jahan Dotson. I do. And I haven't even gotten into really digging into these guys' tape. I've seen them all play. I haven't seen, I haven't looked into it in depth. I'm not a huge fan of either. And, I still think that's they have the upside, but I love me some Sky Moore and Christian Watson at this point.
Yeah, so this class is going to be really interesting for me in my model, just because it severely penalizes wide receivers who play in the FBS and outside of the Power Five, and then it even more harshly dings wide receivers outside of the FBS. You look at the numbers, and like even guys with insane numbers, like the hit rate on that is like 10%. You'll like on the high end, you'll get a Devontae Adams, or you'll get a Cooper Kupp, or you'll get a Deontay Johnson. And then on the low end, I mean, like guys like Daniel Brennerman and, players whose names you've never even heard before. But yeah, I mean, I really love both of these guys too, especially on tape. Brett Whitefield called me at the Senior Bowl and he was like, bro, Christian Watson is insane. This is a top 5 wide receiver in this class. The way he moves at his size is unreal. And then the combine happened. The combine, by Spork score, historic, nearly 99th percentile freak athlete. So really like him. Sky Moore, the tape is obscene. I've seen a ton of Antonio Brown comps, and I hate that comp, just like you hate that comp, because there's so many Antonio Brown comps. Elijah Moore got that last year, but you did see it. You
shouldn't be able to make active comps to players from beyond 10 years.
Who are going to the Hall of Fame? Yes.
I mean, we're talking about a different era of football that, Antonio Brown, he's concluding his career here. I don't think he's a guy that we could really comp. He comes from a different era, I believe. And so I feel like you have to keep it within at least the past 10 years, because you start comping Sam Howell or Desmond Ridder to Dan Fouts, and kids these days are like, who is that? It's just not going to have the same type of impact when you make that type of a comp.
I think it's also interesting when you look at somebody like Christian Watson and like Alec Pierce. They come from really restrictive systems in college. North Dakota State. I mean, last year we were having this conversation with Trey Lance. Like, Trey Lance never had to throw the ball. He never had to do that. Like, the guy who's throwing the ball to is Christian Watson. But, like, they just never had to do it, right? They're so good that they just run the ball. And same with Cincinnati, right? I mean, we talked a little about Jerome Ford, but you watch even the Alabama game when they're down, they just don't really throw the ball. They just don't really have a creative system to get these guys in space. So, there's also some, I would say, upside in looking at some of these guys who are athletic freaks, but maybe haven't really had the freedom to do what they can with athleticism in college. So just something I think that should be added when you're looking at some of these guys, and you look at some of their production, especially like you look at Alec Pierce and his production just kind of meh.
Well, he did break out this past year. I think
he did break out.
888 yards in that offense is really impressive.
Like, that's really good. Yeah. But like, again, but that's not, I mean, but you're talking about when you're talking about the other top 5 receivers in this class, that's not right. That's not close to where those guys
No,
have
definitely
been,
not. Yeah.
right? But I think you can see like there is potential there, and so you're talking about these guys in around round 2 or round 3 of a fantasy draft, and like those are not Christian Watson. Christian Watson's not going down 3. That would be ridiculous. But
I will say this: if all things being equal, Jamison Williams is right there next to anybody in this class.
Yeah, I heard Dane Brugler say in his podcast a couple of days ago that some teams have him at number 1. I don't think he'll go number 1. I think Garrett Wilson will. But yeah, man, I was telling the guys in the group chat yesterday, like charting Brian Robinson, like, you know, I do like Robinson, but the guy who kept popping off, like when I was watching, coaches film, is Jamison Williams, man. Like they would run deep cross, and every single time it would be a 30-yard gain. Like he does. It's not like a Henry Ruggs type of situation where he just runs fast and tracks the ball. Like he can throttle up, he can throttle down. He understands like how to manipulate corners and use his juice to his advantage, man. I love Jamison Williams. And I think he's going to be a guy who goes a lot earlier than I think the public will expect, just because of how freakish he is and how much he fits into the modern NFL. Like he's a perfect fit for pretty much. You could put Jamison Williams on every offense right now, and he would immediately help them.
He was wide receiver 1 in one of my 2 production and efficiency models.
Really?
If it wasn't,
Scott, real quick, because I love getting in the nitty gritty with you. Like, do you just look at final year production? Or are you looking at career production? Like, what's that factor?
Yeah. So it depends on the position. With wide receiver specifically, it's very much driven by age production numbers and efficiency. Drake London, obviously, model's really going to like him. I have to dig into his separation numbers, which is the obvious concern with him. But just efficiency off the charts. It looks at final season numbers, best season numbers, career numbers, digs into super advanced stats like depth adjusted yards per target over expectation, less advanced stats. And the new really interesting piece that I've added this year and I'm really excited about is competition score. So just looking at the target competition, a specific wide receiver was asked to face. We all know like Jerry Jeudy, Henry Ruggs, the stacked wide receivers of Alabama in years past, Devonta Smith. And I'm especially excited about this because I do expect Treylon Burks is now going to fall relative to, the Garrett Wilsons, Chris Olaves. And what's driving this variable is Wes Huber's Devy rankings, because Wes Huber is a madman. And if you look at his Devy rankings, he goes down to like wide receiver 250. He puts in the work. So it's really easy for me then to come up with a target competition score.
Yeah.
I will say that you're wondering like what in the heck happened at Ohio State that Jamison Williams had to transfer out to produce. And
Brian Hartline, the GOAT recruiter.
There's a guy at Ohio State that's about to rewrite everything that you think a wide receiver should be. Jackson Smith and Jigba is going to be. My
model says he's far and away better than any wide receiver in this class.
The best wide receiver. He will be the best wide receiver in the NFL one day.
Above Jamar Chase.
Wow.
We were in Wes and I are in a CFF Dynasty League, and we did the draft last year, and I completely forgot it. I drafted Jigba in like the 5th or 6th round, and I'm like, what am I missing? Like, why? I didn't understand why, especially Wes. Wes trades up for wants every Ohio State player.
I had already traded so many of my picks that
and there's a couple guys.
I didn't have the capital to move up in this past draft, so I was handicapped.
But back to Jamison Williams, I think he would be wide receiver 1 in this class, like get drafted probably top 10, top 8, if it wasn't for the ACL, and that's probably something you need to consider when you're drafting him in fantasy.
I don't think so. The argument there is not.
But you draft long term. You have a different point of view, Scott, than I think a lot of people take into a dynasty draft.
Yeah,
you look at the big picture. Yeah.
The argument would be you can get him cheaper next year because he's not going to be on the field. He's going to miss training camp. Mm-hmm. And I sort of get that. But I mean, if you have him as your wide receiver one, your dynasty leagues can last an infinite amount of time. And you want the best player. And I think he's the best player. ACLs, pretty par for the course these days.
At wide receiver, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Running back.
Yeah, that's all. Yeah, that's all I was going to say.
We have a lot of ACLs in this class. We have Jamison Williams, Mechie, and George Pickens.
Mm-hmm. And you have London's ankle injury, which is a pretty.
What was that?
Which is like really, it's really
he
been
broke
clouded.
His ankle, I think,
yeah,
right?
like I think I've searched for that.
He's not running. He's not running because of it. So
I thought it was just because he was slow and scared.
Isn't he supposed to
I think
test
that's
pretty
part of
soon,
it.
though?
He's supposed to do jumps, but he's not running. Okay. That's he has a special pro day coming up here.
It was his last game.
Dave, going back to props, how is right now Garrett Wilson?
Guys, I'll be right back. I hate to cut out.
Yeah, no, you're good. Garrett Wilson plus 125. Drake London's plus 125. Like what? How? I have not understood that whatsoever. The first wide receiver drafted. Like,
I'll be honest, I'm pretty heavy on Garrett Wilson to go wide receiver one right now. Like that's my guy. I think I think some early prices, and I would still take that. Sorry, what?
Falcons at 8.
I think Falcons at 8. I think Jets at 10 is probably his floor. I think, I think if you want to look at the Jets specifically, you can just look at Daniel Jeremiah and where he came from. And he came from that front office. He worked under, I'm blanking on the GM's name now, but that's who he worked under. And Jeremiah's got Wilson as a top 5 player. In terms of Drake London, that's a lot of, I think, a little bit of groupthink in terms of where he's going in the draft. I think as a player, he's excellent, and he should easily be a top 5 wide receiver, probably top 3. I think fit can be a bit of a concern because he's because of the separation concerns. I think it's a little bit of do you play this guy on the outside where the separation may be an issue, or do you want to use him more as a big slot, which I think he could do very well. But if we're bringing it back to props, I see Wilson as the clear wide receiver one. I think London was up high on a couple people's boards, and still really high, but he's not running at all. And for a guy who has speed concerns, that's an issue. So I think he needs to jump through the roof, which is possible. But, I think, you need to look at, 39, 40-inch vertical for him to really be even in that wide receiver one conversation at his pro day. So that's kind of where I'm at with London. I do think fit is a bit of a concern with London. Like, I think there are some teams who don't view London as a wide receiver, as a round one prospect because of the separation issues.
Yeah. Because
you have to probably put him in the slot.
Yeah, I think that was Greg Cosell's concern too when he wrote up the scouting report is the separation. I think that's everybody's concern. But yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I think Garrett Wilson was like minus 110 to be first wide receiver drafted like 2 weeks ago, and now he's back plus 125. So I think you're right up about London just kind of being a groupthink guy, which is going to be a big thing for the next 3 or 4 weeks if you're betting props, and something to definitely exploit. Because I'm Wilson. Like I think it's pretty clear at this point. He's number one on the board.
Yeah, especially when you talk about props. I mean, groupthink is the prevailing thing about in these markets. They're not necessarily super sharp at the moment, but there is a lot of groupthink, and we can get to the quarterback class a little later. But I think that's an area where like groupthink is.
Well, I did want to say we haven't heard from Ben, but I know he has something going on at 9, so I think we probably should cut it by 8:30. So we're probably at like the 34-minute mark here.
Yeah, he just responded back and said yes. So yeah, we got 30 minutes or so, but so we got Wilson at number 1. We've got Jamison probably number 1 if he doesn't pop the ACL. And then I think, the same conversation we had with running back, I think wide receiver 3 through 10 just comes down to like what you value, and specifically for NFL teams, just how they fit.
And we haven't even talked about the guy who ran a 4.2, Tyquan Thornton, which, I mean, I'm just going to throw it out there. He didn't have the type of production that we want to see because you have your track guys. And the problem with those guys is they only know how to run one speed. They don't know how to adjust their speed and vary their speed in their routes in order to get open.
Was Ruggs a track guy?
I don't know that.
Yeah. Okay.
I do not know that.
Yeah.
I wouldn't be surprised if he was.
Yeah.
But
a lot of these guys are track guys.
One of my models has Tyquan Thornton right below Jahan Dotson and then Drake London. It really likes him.
Yeah, no, I mean, you run a 4.2.
Because I didn't hear much of him.
Yeah,
no, this is not factoring in athleticism, Wes.
Oh, no.
This is only production.
Okay, so the issue with in Baylor, though, was the quarterback situation. Because, I mean, I don't think he had the same quarterback for more than 1 year the entire time he was there. I love the quarterback they have there. I'll leave the Debbie stuff out. But so I mean there's some serious issues there. But then there's the other guy that I know you love as well, Scott, and that's Wandell Robinson. He was a little bit slower. He wasn't as athletic as I was hoping for. But this kid can do it all. And he's going to be an NFL player. He's going to play a significant role with whatever team.
It's that height.
Yeah, but it's the same height as we see with Rondell. I mean, and it's the same height that we have with a guy like Calvin Austin III out of Memphis. But I think Calvin Austin, he's a really good sleeper there. I think he's a guy that it really doesn't matter these days because we're not just saying, okay, go out and play split end and then you go, to the other side and we're going to run our heavy set and we're going to drive the ball and then every now. No, it's not like that anymore. It's not like that at all.
So
they're going to spread your guys out and you can play small. And you can have your outside receivers can be 6 foot in today's NFL.
Right. But I mean, we're not talking about 6 foot. We're talking about 5'8", Rondell.
No. I don't mean moving them out. I'm saying your outside receivers can be 6 foot and you can have whatever height as long as you can get open and you can catch the ball and you've got some understanding of how to defeat coverages. You can be 5'8" in the NFL today. I think Rondell.
I don't know that I agree with that just because I'm viewing Rondell's rookie season as a bust because I listened to that post-draft press conference and Cliff Kingsbury was beside himself, just convinced he had an immediate starter who was going to take the league by storm. And then what happened at the tail end of the season? He couldn't play over UDFA, Antoine Wesley. He did basically nothing. And then you look at the track record of wide receivers listed at 5'8", or below since 1990, the year I was born, over 30 years ago. How many posted multiple seasons with at least 650 receiving yards? One.
How many receivers at 5'8" have played more than a couple of games in the NFL? It's a different time.
But that's part of the problem is like teams see that height and they don't want to draft him. And I don't think Wandell's going to go early. My model's going to think he should go pretty early. I think the NFL is going to disagree. And it's a number of things. And I think the biggest one is in infinitely small catch radius, which further makes him super landing spot dependent. Like, sure, with an Aaron Rodgers, he could do work, but with a Kyler Murray type of level of accuracy passer, that's a big concern.
No, it is. He did have actually I have him at a -4% wingspan. He is a smaller wingspan than anybody over the last 10 years.
Yikes.
But did you see what he did against SEC cornerbacks last year? I mean, the kid can play.
I mean, it was almost everything on the 9 route, though, right?
Hey, I'm not going to force it. When I evaluate a player and then I come to the realization, wow, it's so off. Like I'm going to drop that guy like he was not important to me. You know what I mean? I'll admit it too. Right. And so what I'm saying is what really makes me sick is when I look at how Nebraska used him. They used him as a running back. So you think about this guy, this small framed guy that they forced into a running back role. And he was essentially like their 50-50 running back. at 5'8", 178 pounds, running against Big Ten defenses. That just makes me sick to my stomach. But looking at what he did for Kentucky, man, it was impressive. I was really impressed. And I think my main takeaway, without really diving into the tape on him yet, is that I was really impressed. I watched my kids. They love Ohio State and they love Kentucky. Those are their two teams. And so I watched every one of his games, and I was just blown away. I mean, watching him play, he looked like he was just playing at a different speed than everybody else on the field.
Yeah, I mean, it's the issue with Wandell is just, I think the testing matters when you're talking about how his size, and I think that's the most disconcerting thing, because you look at the production, and I think he was somebody who I was expecting would test pretty well.
Well, he did. I mean, he did post 87th percentile 10 split, 79th on the 20. But yeah, there wasn't much explosion there. I mean, I'm not going to try to come out here and sell you Wandell Robinson as Elijah Moore, but I will say that he did really well against man coverage. And that's one of the things that I just fall in love with right away. If you can dominate man coverage, then you're a guy that I know you can have utility in the NFL. So is he going to lead the NFL in receiving yards? He is not. I'm not saying that. But I do think he's going to be a guy that's going to come in and he's going to produce. And I think he'll rewrite the way we look at 5'8" guys. And I kind of feel the same way about Calvin Austin. I liked him quite a bit. He wasn't as strong late in the year for Memphis, and that was kind of disappointing. But man, he was just like on another level there at the beginning. So we'll see with the 5'8" experiment and see. And then, of course, Rondale Moore, he's going to have without dude there now, Christian Kirk, he's going to have the role to himself. So, we'll see.
It'll be a brand new role for Rondale. I know, Scott, I agree with you. Like his rookie year was definitely
big time bust.
But he will have a new role this year. I got to think, but we'll see. Guys, should we talk quarterback just real quick? Here we got like 20-ish minutes. Dave, I know you've been chomping at the bit to talk quarterback.
Yeah, you got to tell us what you're thinking.
Go ahead.
Well, I'll start out first. I think this quarterback class is pretty bad.
Yeah, I think we all agree with you there.
It's pretty bad. I don't think anybody should be drafted in round one. But
that like 4 are going to go in the first just because of how bad
4
the quarterbacks are outside the top 15. They're bad.
I think you see 2, maybe 3. I would lean 2 right now. Maybe 3.
Willis and Pickett?
Willis and Pickett would be the 2. And then maybe Ritter or Corral. Maybe one of those guys. But I definitely don't think Willis should be a first-round pick.
And you don't like Sam Howell, going back to
I think Howell's bad, too. So,
yeah, I know.
I can start with Sam Howell. So, he's a one-trick pony. The one trick is great, though. Like, the one trick is awesome. He probably throws the best deep ball in the class. Like, I think by far, like, he's a great deep ball thrower. That's about it, though. He takes
QB by committee in Miami. Bring him in for 3rd and long.
Yeah, basically, yeah. That's kind of basically it. And I think a lot of people will make with how there's a drop in, I guess, talent around him. I don't really buy that. He had the same offensive line this year. Josh Downs is, I think, the current wide receiver at UNC is better than the 2 guys who were there before him.
Had him the year before when they were.
Yeah, he was there
it's
too.
Not like he got.
He didn't play.
He played, but he just didn't play very much.
That's fair. But I think in general, Howell's a one-trick pony. He can throw a deep ball. He can't really do anything else. He can run. He's not fast. He's not elusive. He takes way too many sacks. Yeah, he's not fast, and he runs too much, I think, because he can't do a lot of the intermediate stuff.
Okay, but can you name another wide receiver that they had outside of Josh Downs?
Last year, they had a bunch of guys transfer.
Okay,
they had Corrales, and they had a bunch of other dudes that were there and transfer. And yeah,
that didn't transfer. Can you name a player that was at North Carolina that caught passes that didn't transfer?
No, that's a fair point. But I also think Josh Downs is really good.
He's really good, and I have him high in my Debbie ranks. I'm not
like if you're talking about guys who are going to rewrite the script on being 5'9", 5'10", like that guy's Josh Downs.
I'll shut up. We want to hear your quarterback takes. So go ahead.
But in general, I don't think Howell's sniffing the first round, so I don't think it's a huge deal. Malik Willis is probably the quarterback I feel strongly most about in this class, and I just don't see it. Like, I think people think, oh, he went to Liberty, so he didn't play for that good a team. That team in the AP poll they were ranked 29th. They were just outside of the top 25.
Yeah.
They beat the year before. They beat Coastal Carolina. That was the team that beat Zach Wilson's undefeated BYU team. They beat them in a bowl game. And then this year, he just completely fell apart. I mean, I don't know. Like, his worst game may have been against Louisiana Monroe, and that's a bottom 5 team in college football. He had 3 interceptions, and they lost to Louisiana Monroe, a bottom 5 team, a team that was top 30, top 45, or top 40 or top 30 going into the season. And he has really hard time just throwing the ball when he's not meant to. And that's the thing. And people see the athleticism.
Yeah.
And I think it's a huge overcorrection when people look at somebody like Josh Allen or Justin Herbert, who have actually exploded. And because a lot of evaluators were like, oh, these guys were guys who were super athletic, and they just needed, they had the skill set, they had the arm. And so now, because those guys hit, we're doing the way overcorrection, right? Now we're doing Malik Willis has the skill set. He's got the arm and he's got the mobility. Now we just got to teach him how to play quarterback, right? Whereas 3 years ago, we were saying, why are we even trying to teach these guys how to play quarterback? They can't play quarterback. So now it's right.
In defense of that, I think it's because there's asymmetrical returns from the quarterback position, which is far and away the most important position in football, at least 8 times as valuable as the next most important position's best player. And then the top 7 quarterbacks are 8 times as valuable as the 16th best quarterback in football. And so I think what they've learned from Patrick Mahomes and from Josh Allen and these guys with very obvious flaws is that upside is more valuable than the perceived flaws are a detriment to your team. And so I think just the fact that you can make those upside comps to Malik Willis means he belongs in the first round, even if the hit rate you think is 25%, just because the returns, if that goes the right way for you, 25%, just immediately reshapes your team into a juggernaut over the final years of his rookie contract.
I couldn't agree more. I think that if you look at, so we say that, that and I love the way you phrase that, Scott, because the top 7 quarterbacks, the top 8, let's expand that to the top 15. The guys from 15 to whatever, they don't know how to play football at quarterback, and it's really bad. There's a serious problem in the NFL to where they're just checking down constantly. Certain teams, they have no other choice but to check down over and over and over, and we're seeing the depth of throw just compounded unless you're looking at those top guys who are just opening up the field for everybody else. They're playing a different level of football. We're not seeing that from the guys from 15 or so down. And so I think that there is zero chance. It makes no sense for there not to be 5 or 6 quarterbacks drafted in the first round. You've got to take those lottery picks. I'll admit it. I do not follow rumors about who's going here, who's thinking this and who's thinking that. I don't care about that stuff. Like, I hate it. I think it's a bunch of lies that people are passing on, and I'll never buy into it, or will I write about it. What I think is important is that we need to find out who these quarterbacks, who the next quarterbacks are gonna be, and in order to do that, we have to draft them. And the NFL's track record for drafting quarterbacks is, I think you could flip a coin and eventually it's going to land 50-50 one or the other. And I feel like it's been at a lower rate at quarterback in the NFL than it should be. I feel like it's been trash. Everything the NFL is doing outside of a few teams has been trash when it comes to drafting quarterbacks.
So why is the answer to drafting poorly at quarterback to draft quarterbacks who shouldn't be taken in round 1 high in the draft?
Because if you hit, you're a billionaire.
Well, not only that, you get 5 years of cost controlled, play. If you hit, you get 5 years of cost control play. But so like with Willis specifically, like if you look at clean pocket accuracy, clean pocket EPA per attempt, he's dead last. Like in this class, and it's by a margin. Like
there are concerns. I totally agree there. I totally agree. I think his intermediate accuracy, it's not that great. He's got that cannon. He
how are Josh Allen's numbers in
really
college?
That
not good. That's exactly the point, Scott. We're throwing darts and we're just hoping, please.
The hit rate is brutal, but the expected value is still high.
Yeah. So I think the biggest difference between somebody like Josh Allen and Malik Willis, and even Justin Herbert and Malik Willis, is in college, Josh Allen and Justin Herbert both played in super restrictive systems. Like super restrictive. Mm-hmm. Like Josh Allen played at Wyoming, where they run the ball 90% of the time. They like 3 tight ends, 1 wide receiver, right? Really restricted.
Well, that was Josh Allen's fault. He was like, dude, seriously? Wyoming?
Sure. He should have gone somewhere else. Like, should have. And Justin Herbert, like, the Oregon offense is not, Mario Cristobal's Oregon offense is not the most forgiving when it comes to talent and athleticism and showcasing that. And the thing about the Liberty offense, it's all RPOs. Like, that's what it is. Like, it's literally all in Malik Willis's hands to do whatever it is he can. And it's really simple. And I don't really see how, if you're going to make it more restrictive of an offense, which is going to happen in the NFL. Like, the NFL is not going to.
So Lance Zierlein used this to frame a bull case argument with Malik Willis, and that it wasn't a good fit for him. He's better suited for a pro-ready offense, a pro-style offense. And if he landed in a pro-style offense in the NFL, like less spread, less RPOs, he'd be far more successful. I don't analyze tape to know whether or not that's right or wrong, but I thought that was at least interesting.
I will say this: of all the head coaches that were fired, all of them came from pro-style offenses, and they were all replaced by guys that know the language of the modern NFL. We're not going to see a lot of pro-style offenses anymore. So drafting quarterbacks and expecting them to come into a pro-style offense, you're a dinosaur.
One interesting Malik Willis stat where he really stood out. Some former offensive lineman who I think works at ESPN now, I don't remember who it was. He had a tweet thread a year ago where he said, like, the entire basis of his process for watching college quarterbacks and projecting them to the NFL was he would only look at 3rd and longs, and where, it's on you to convert this to a first down. I don't know if that's true or not, or if that's good process or not. But Malik Willis's 2020 was one of the best ever in terms of first down per drop back conversion rate on 3rd and 7 and longer. And I just thought that was interesting. You don't have a great supporting cast. Sure, you're up against inferior competition, but on those high pressure plays, he got it done with his arm or with his legs. And yeah, maybe that's what matters, because he initially brought that thread up in talking about how people miss with Justin Herbert. So maybe there's something similar going on there. Although I will say Malik Willis's 2020 was one of the best ever, but it was way better than Zach Wilson's best season or Mac Jones's best season.
Was awesome.
Yeah.
But
we're talking. So here's why I have the issue.
2020 is awesome.
So what? Real quick.
No,
why?
It is, and I was impressed. There was one game in particular that I was really impressed by Malik Willis, and that was against NC State. I think he's going to be an NFL quarterback. I think he's got. He's. I mean, if I'm going to say that I like Sam Howell, I'm going to say I like Malik Willis, like 1A, 1B type stuff. But here's the issue I have with these independent teams is they don't attach themselves to a Power 5 conference so that they can build their own schedule. They can, they get their own profit shares, all that stuff. But then they go out and they make their schedules, and it just includes group of 5 opponents. That's a big problem for me, and I think it hurts the athletes that play there. And then that was the big problem that I had with Zach Wilson. Now they did end up playing a lot of West Coast Pac-12 teams. So and then in those games, Zach Wilson did not look good, and that was part of the reason why I didn't like him very much. But I'm feeling like on the other side of the fence here with Malik Willis. I feel like I've watched the combine and I was blown away by what he was able to do and another guy I really like in this class, but people are talking about him like he's a statue. I feel like it's unfair. He had the knee issue, and that was Carson Strong. I think Carson Strong's got a lot of potential, and I normally stay away from it. Actually, I was talking to Dave about this last year. We were talking about Carson Strong, and I can't remember who the other quarterback was, but just these guys that play these cupcake schedules, it's so hard to get behind the numbers that they produce. You're basically left with the tape. You can't use the data on these guys. You have to just watch the tape, and you've got to know what you're looking for. Otherwise, you just got to let the NFL team draft who they want. You just have no idea if they're good or not. But I really liked what I saw from Malik Willis, and I really liked what I saw with Carson Strong. But the one problem I have with the quarterback position is that you can never project beyond 1 year at quarterback, and that's that really handicaps this entire process for us. We can't project quarterback. The development is just so difficult to the stage that if you're not a quarterback coach, you just can't see what you need to see at that early stage.
I do think that's a point that's lost in the upside argument. Like, I think the NFL is not the NBA. You draft somebody, the first overall pick, right? You draft them. Players get as much time to develop in the offseason as they want. Practice time, whatever it is, like, they can just develop as they want. NFL is way different. You get 2 hours of practice time during training camp for a certain amount of time. That's as many live reps as you're going to get. That's it. Like, that's all the live reps you're going to get. And in general, when it comes to the upside, like, yeah, if you hit on it, it is great. And the downside is you draft Sam Darnold, then you're stuck with a quarterback for 4 or 5 years, and that's 4 or 5 years down the drain. You think there's upside there, and there isn't. So Jordan. Like, the thing is that the upside seems so big, and the downside is it's still there. It just means you're going to be bad for a longer period of time. I also think, you can
whiff on a first round pick and still be fine. Look at the Chiefs with CEH or the Packers with Jordan Love.
Well, the Chiefs have Patrick Mahomes, but
they have Patrick Mahomes, right?
Yeah.
I do think also the cost control argument is becoming less and less important as we see quarterbacks in their second or third year wanting massive contracts and even wanting to, ask for trades. I mean, a lot of these guys are on rookie deals, are asking for trades, or asking to go wherever they want to go, with guys going into a year or two in a deal. So I think that's also another aspect that becomes the cost control is great in the first 3-4 years, and I'm not here to argue that like that's a great way to build a team, but it's something to consider that as we kind of go into this new area where contracts are now fully guaranteed for quarterbacks in the new Deshaun Watson contract era, that's going to change what the rookie quarterbacks sort of want and how these guys sort of operate those contracts, and the cost control benefit becomes less and less.
Well, let me throw this out there to you guys, Graham, and I'll let you take it off after this. I just have this really quick idea. So in my view of the way what the needs of the NFL, I feel like that under offensive linemen they're devalued right now, and I feel like I think it's understandable because I mean, look at the Bengals. They went to the Super Bowl and they had the second worst offensive line in the NFL. I don't feel like the offensive line is as important as it used to be. So I think if you're gonna toss a dart at a position in today's NFL, it's going to be at quarterback, it's going to be at edge rusher, and it's going to be at wide receiver.
Agree.
Yeah.
I will just say the Malik Willis argument for fantasy is a lot easier. Greg Cassell, again, you could buy his our draft guide, comes out on Friday. He said Malik Willis is somewhere in between Jalen Hurts and Lamar Jackson as a runner. And as a passer, he's already better than both. So, I mean, that's a very easy argument with rushing production, the Konami code being so much more valuable.
Probably better than Jalen Hurts. I'll agree with that. I don't know about Lamar. Lamar's he's a little
Lamar
more
the last 2 years has been really bad.
No. I know. But I think he's a little better than what people give him credit for. I'm not saying he's one of the greats or anything, but I think that comes into what we've been talking about with dual threat quarterbacks is okay. So he can't make this throw, but then he can gain that yardage with his legs. So it's like it makes your offense look better than it actually is. So I think there's an argument for having that type of quarterback under center, but then at the same time, then we run into the situation with Lamar Jackson's ankle, right?
Yeah. What's interesting is the EPA bros are like, well, EPA per pass is so much more efficient than EPA per run. Interestingly, EPA per run for quarterbacks is more efficient than EPA per pass for quarterbacks. So that is extremely valuable in my eyes.
Mitch Trubisky is the god in EPA per run.
I mean, so is Eli Manning and Matt Ryan on a per attempt basis.
That's such a great point, Graham. That is such a great point. That is like he's the poster boy for this example, because 2 years ago, nobody wanted Mitchell Trubisky. I mean, he was just like walking around, and then the Bills signed him. And then now he's a free agent, and he's like, oh, take our money, take it. And we want you on our team, because people are like, we need a quarterback so bad, we don't even know what to do. And they'll just throw money at people.
So I got a question. So Jalen Hurts went mid-second, right? Yeah. And he developed into the guy who he is now. Would you trade, if you're an NFL team, would you trade a first-round pick for Jalen Hurts right now?
I would not.
No. And for what it's worth, I like Jalen Hurts a lot, and I think he's got a bad rap, but no, I would not.
But I mean, everyone and their mother has Malik in round one in their mock, so it's sort of like.
Well, that's not true. Daniel Jeremiah did not have him in his mock.
But I think there's value in the unknown.
And Lance and Dane both said he doesn't belong in round one and laughed at the idea of 102 to the Lions.
I laugh at that. That's
so my question to Dave is how would you compare him to Trey Lance coming out a year ago? Because now Trey Lance is one of the most valuable commodities in Dynasty. Obviously, landing spot is huge there with the Yak superstars and the Kyle Shanahan. But take away landing spot and just look at them as prospects. How would you compare the two?
I think Lance had a lot higher ceiling, personally. I think as a passer, there was a lot more there. And I also think, I think the transition for Lance is going to be easier than it will be for Willis in terms of, a scheme fit. Lance was a very pro-style scheme. And obviously you bring in, I know you said not to do scheme, but you bring into a more play-action heavy scheme that's going to fit Lance a little bit better. I think Willis, he's come from really RPO heavy college offense. So I think that's a pretty steep learning curve. And I really struggle with the passing. I think the passing is a big issue for Willis. I do think the most likely landing spot is going to be for the Steelers. And in terms of fantasy, I would be surprised if Willis played more than 4 or 5 games in his first year.
And is there an NFL team out there that is off of the analytics more than the Steelers? I think it just makes perfect sense that he lands with the Steelers.
Steelers have been the number one team he's been linked to.
That would be my guess, because I think Pickett goes a little bit before then personally. But I would say that's probably where he ends up. But for fantasy, I think if you're drafting him, you got to know you're probably only getting the last quarter or so of the season. I've not seen a single evaluation that says this guy's ready to play day one. I've not seen that.
You guys are making me feel good about my plus 550 Malik Willis to go number 2. So I made that 3 weeks ago.
I suck at player props, so I'm not going to sit here and make that argument. But I will say this: you go back to prior to this past season, and you try to talk about Kenny Pickett as anything close to the first round, and your reputation is destroyed. I mean, this guy was trash.
Same with Joe Burrow, right?
No.
He was not a first-round pick before.
Not a first-round pick, but draftable. Kenny Pickett wouldn't be drafted. He threw as many interceptions as he did touchdowns prior to this year. I mean, he was he was like, I mean, below average is being kind.
Yeah, I'm low in this quarterback class. Like I said, I don't think any of these quarterbacks are worth a round 1 pick.
Yeah.
This class is pretty bad. I think we're forced to talk about these guys as if there are day 1 and day 2 picks.
Yeah.
Because it's the quarterback position.
Well, last year we're talking about Mac Jones, and I'm like, well, I mean, we were blessed. We had man. I mean, they may not have been the greatest quarterback class, but we had some really good talent, a lot of talent, and even Mac Jones, and so I'm like looking at all these guys that just have talent just pouring out of their ears, and I'm like, well, man, Mac Jones just doesn't fit in. Mac Jones makes this quarterback class look ridiculous. Yeah. You know, I don't think there's a single quarterback in this class that's comparable to Mac Jones, and the guy can't even throw from sideline to sideline.
Yeah, I mean, you're looking closer to Davis Mills range for this class. I think there's probably arguments to be made that Davis Mills is a better quarterback prospect than.
I like Davis Mills, by the way. I like Davis Mills.
But yeah, I think it's a poor. Again, if you're taking a shot at Malik Willis, I think the question was like 1.1 or what, at first Superflex, like your first pick in Superflex, like that's a really rich price for a guy who I don't believe deserves that value.
Yeah.
You're just boosting it up because he's going to be QB1, but
Willis's range of outcomes is crazy.
Yes.
Yeah. I mean, there's no way.
It is for every quarterback in this class. Everyone.
There's no way I'm not taking, Walker, Brees, Wilson, Traylon Burks. I mean,
even in a super flex, I'm going wide receiver, running back in the first. I don't know how many picks.
It's like, and you know what I'm doing? I have 2 RBs in round 1, and then it's just like a million wide receivers.
Yeah. I tend to lean where Scott's got, and I just like to draft it because there's just so much more upside with the wide receivers.
I will say
we have 2 minutes left.
There's one league that we're in, and you drafted you didn't draft any quarterbacks, you didn't draft any tight ends, you drafted all wide receivers, and you destroyed my team.
I have way too many wide receivers in that league, but yeah.
I mean, that's a good problem to have in Dynasty typically. All right, so Dave, real quick, give us your top 3 tight ends in order. Wes and I have already debated this at length, and we'll turn it into a podcast at some point.
I think the top 3 tight ends for me, I personally like Dulcich.
Oh, you just
even after Trey McBride's pro day,
Scott just fell in love with you.
I personally Dulcich was great at the combine. I mean,
yeah, no, I met the kid. He's not
as good as McBride's pro day.
Kid. Yeah,
that's pro day. I would wait for some official numbers, and I think it was originally announced he was at 4.54, and that was really 4.6. I mean, I like McBride. But Dulcich, McBride, and then Jelani Woods.
Oh, you didn't mention my guy.
Is tight end 3. I think the Woods is just Woods is interesting because he's just an athletic freak. He's just an absolutely athletic freak.
He's Albert O 2.0 to me.
Yeah, no, we're both on him, Scott. I like him a lot. I like we when John did his interview with Jake Ferguson, he definitely had the best quote. He said, "I choose violence in my game," and I just fell in love with the kid right there. I was like, I just want to see more. He had a great
combine.
Yeah, I want to see more kids coming in saying, I choose violence. That was awesome.
No, that's Daniel Bellinger. But no. My production model liked Jake Ferguson far more than consensus. But your tight end 2, I believe, Wes.
Tight end 1.
No.
Oh, your tight end 1 is Kohler?
Kohler.
I
love
goodness.
Charlie Kohler.
He's probably my tight end 3. Isaiah Likely with the
I love Likely too. I think when you get into the conversation of Kohler, Likely, well, I shouldn't put it that way. When you get into the conversation between Kohler, the Colorado State kid, I'm drawing a blank. I'm trying to hurry. Yeah, and then likely, I think I'm fine with however you have it, and I also love Jelani Woods too. I love him, and then I think it's more of like a 4 tight end class, and then we'll get into like the Dulcich and Ferguson group after that.
I think the reason I got Woods kind of jumped up, I didn't have him like that before, but I do think he's probably tight end 3 coming off of the board, and especially a tight end, those guys, if you're getting drafted in round 5, 6, like you're there as a blocker maybe, and maybe you see a few spare targets. So, but I do think Jelani Woods has a chance to go day 2, and I think that's a big boost for him.
Yeah.
Well, I do want to correct something I said earlier. I said I hadn't read anything that Greg Cosell had put out. I don't want to give the impression that I don't value his opinion. I just want to make sure that it's understood that in order for me to write up my own evaluations, I can't read other people's evaluations while I'm doing it. It doesn't make sense. It's a conflict of interest, and it's lazy. So I can't do that. So I don't want to feel like I don't want anyone to think I don't think that there's value in that.
Wes is such a purist. He stays true to his process.
Wes is such a legend, man. Yeah, you're a freaking legend. Dude.
No one drives tape like Wes.
Guys, this has been awesome. I challenge anybody to find a better overview of this quarterback, running back, wide receiver class than this. But we got to get out of here. This has been freaking awesome. Guys.
Draft guide tomorrow.
Thank you so much for
Tomorrow's Friday. Damn.
Yeah, tomorrow's Friday. Yeah, April 1st.
We have PGA now. We're doing big things.
Exciting.
We have a major announcement.
You got to check out our PGA stuff, man.
Yeah, we've got
a major announcement coming after the draft.
Yes, we do. Yeah, this is going to be a great year for fantasypoints.com. But yeah,
PGA on Saturday.
We're right in time for the Masters, the best sporting event every year. I challenge you on this.
And this was Dave's first live stream. I just want to say, guys,
wow, he killed it.
He has no followers. He needs
I don't really
Does he tweet though?
No, he doesn't. He doesn't care.
I thought about it. I go back and forth. It's
tweet. You're part of the Fantasy Points fam now.
Yeah, man. I'm a big fan, Dave.
We'll try and get those prop articles from you at some point.
No, Dave's got it right. The number one rule of Twitter is never tweet. So yeah.
Sean Siegel, yeah. He nailed it.
This is great. For Scott, for Wes, for Dave, for Ben Behind the Glass, for sticking with us for 2 hours. We'll catch you probably in a couple weeks. We'll probably do something similar once we get close.
Oh, Hot Ones Challenge. Me and Graham, we're going to buy the Hot Ones lineup, and we're going to do it on the air draft special. I just want to get that out there. Sorry, Graham. Go ahead.
No. It's going to be great, and toilets will be ruined after. So make sure you check that out for the draft. But yeah, guys, thank you.
There you go.